end of the spectrum, you have Mula Prakriti. Mula Prakriti, as we described last time, is the primordial or the point of singularity, if you want to call it that way, before the Big Bang. That soup, that primordial soup, is called as the Mula Prakriti, which is the most subtlest form of matter stroke energy that moves from matter to energy. Upanishads talk a lot about that, about how the matter can be in material form and in the energy form. So that is the Mula Prakriti. Then you have the right end of the spectrum, which is the grossest, as we know, is Prithvi. Prithvi is the solid state. So you have the Mula Prakriti on one hand, and then you have Prithvi, or the earth, or the solid state, which is the grossest form of matter. So this transformation from Mula Prakriti to the Panchabhutas, which is Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Aap, and Prithvi, is creation. And we described how this stages of creation happens. So the subtle Mula Prakriti then becomes Sattva, Rajas, and Tamo gunas. These are particles with those kind of attributes. And these then start mixing together, and they form a very, very subtle matter called Mahat. And the Mahat, a portion of the Mahat, becomes slightly more gross, and that is called Ahankara. Then Ahankara then branches out into three aspects. The Tamasa Ahankara becomes the Panchabhutas and the Panchatanmatras. And then the Vaikarika and the Tejasa Ahamkaras, they become the components of the mind, the Indriyas, Jnana Indriyas, and Karma Indriyas. Okay. So then we also described about how this transformation is very well described in various Upanishads and Gita in particular, for example. Across various chapters in the Gita, particularly in chapter 13. So if you want to grasp the Veda Vyasa's view of what creation is, please spend time going through chapter 13 in detail. So now Taittiriya Upanishad came about in our discussion last week. So in Taittiriya Upanishad, which is part of the Krishna Yajurveda, says Tasmad va etasmad atmanaha akashaha sambhutaha akashad vayuhu Vayor Agni, Agner Apaha, Adabhyaha Prithvi, Prithvyo Aushadaya, Aushadabhyo Annam, Annat Purusha. So it gives that stage, how even the Panchabhutas from the Supreme, Akasha was created. And Akasha, this is an interesting view about Akasha in Veda. Akasha is not an empty thing, empty space is not Bhutakasha. The view from Vedas is Bhutakasha is made of matter. It is made of matter, subtle matter, which is called Bhuta Akasha. Okay. Now the Bhuta Akasha then becomes Vayu, which is air, that is the gaseous state. Then it becomes heat, the plasma state. Then it becomes water, liquid. Then it becomes solid state. So this is described very well in Taittiriya Upanishad, and the Upanishads then goes to describe how in each the Supreme Being is involved in the transition. Gita, 7, for example, summarizes this, and this fits in. So the scheme that I provided in this PowerPoint slide fits in very well with what Veda Vyasa Krishna has said in chapter 7 and chapter 13. In chapter 7, he says, Bhumir Apo Anilaha Vayur Kamo Kam Mano Buddhir Evacha Ahankara Iti Iyam Me Binna Prakrutir Ashtara. Okay, he says, these transformations of Prakriti, me is important there, me is mind. It is under control. Yeah, this transformation of Prakriti, the Mula Prakriti, is under my control. And the same Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Aap, Prithvi, he gives them as Bhumir, Apo, Anilaha, Vayur, Kham. Okay. Similarly, in chapter 13, Krishna says, Mahat Bhutani, Ahankaro, Buddhir, Avyaktam Evacha, Indriyani, Dasha Ekam cha, Panchacha, Indriya Gocharaha. So here, when he talks about Pancha Indriya Gocharaha are the Pancha Tanmatras. They are 5. Then he says Dasha Ekam Indriyani. Dasha Ekam means 11. So what are the 11s? 5 Karma Indriyas, 5 Jnana Indriyas, and Manas. So they form the Dasha Eka Indriyani. Then he talks about Ahankara. He talks about Mahat. Mula Prakriti is also called Avyakta. So again, he lists this are the essential components of this universe. So again, the message from the Gitas and the Upanishads is we need to have these 24 components of the universe in our fingertips before we go to the next stage. So this so far is the creation of Jada Prakriti. So this is the creation of matter and its manifestations and transformations. So the next aspect of creation is, once matter is created, somebody needs to be aware that this matter exists. Yeah. So for that, the Chetanas come out. So the Chetanas come out in various ways from the Supreme Being. And again, the Vedas, Upanishads, and the Gita, Bhagavatam, they all talk about this. Now, the essential components that's moving on to the next stage, next slide, the essential components, the 24 tattvas, as we call it, the 24 key elements that then mix together to form the Brahmanda. Each component of this has got a sentient being who controls this. This is the Vedic view. So what the Supreme does is, during creation, he not only starts transformations of the universe, but from his own being, jivas of various types emanate from him. Last week, we described an example in Mundaka Upanishad where he talks about a fire and the sparks that come out of the fire. Yeah. So the sparks that come out of the fire are the jivas, and the fire is Brahman. So that's the example that's given in Atharvana Upanishad. So similarly, each component has got so these jivas that come out, they take individual bodies. So the Mula Prakriti, the subtle matter, the Mula Prakriti is the body of Lakshmi or the Shri Tattva. She is also called Chetana Prakriti. So you have Jada Prakriti, then you have Chetana Prakriti. Yeah? And in various places in Upanishads and Vedas, Lakshmi or Shri Tattva is also celebrated as Avyakta. And she is also celebrated as Akshara. Yeah? So she is the consort of Vishnu who forms the Mula Prakriti. Now she becomes three, Shri, Bhu and Durga, and they look after the Sattva, Rajas and Tamogunas. Okay? Now Lakshmi and Lakshmi and Vishnu together, their first offspring is Chaturmukha Brahma. Now the Chaturmukha Brahma's body is the Mahat Tattva, which is the very subtle matter. And then from Chaturmukha Brahma, Rudra and others come out. Rudra's body is Ahankara. So like that, you have various exalted jivas. That is, these are the key 24 key Abhimani Devatas, as we call it. They come out from different aspects of different Devatas. So I have listed them here. And a few Devatas here may be worth contemplating here. So from the Ahankara, as I said, Tejasanta. So from Vaikarika, we described last week that Manas comes in and mind has 5 components. And we spent some time talking about the greatness of Rudra. For today, I want to give you a flavor of the greatness of Garuda and the greatness of Sesha. Who are these individuals that we celebrate so much in our mythologies and your Puranas and our daily worship? Garuda is one he is such an exalted, such a great being. He also controls certain components of the mind. Yeah? Garuda Tattva is also called Veda Purusha. He is also called as Veda Purusha. And why is he called Veda Purusha? The reason being, so mind, as I said, has got 5 components. Rudra controls desires and emotions and so on. Whereas what Garuda does, and the Vedas, it's very interesting what the portfolio of Garuda is. And the Vedas describe the portfolio of Garuda is to make us be interested in Apaurushaya Vedas. He will give you the desire to go and learn about the Vedas. So that is why he's called Veda Purushan. And in fact, as you will see in many images and in certain schools, Garuda is very, very important because he is a Vahana for Vishnu. Vishnu sits on Garuda and he goes around. What does that mean? That is a very metaphorical meaning. If Vishnu is sitting on Garuda, what it means is Garuda is the Abhimani Devata of that aspect of your mind that gives you interest to go and read the Vedas and understand the Vedas. So when you get interested in the Vedas become the vehicle by which you can know God. So similarly, Garuda is that vehicle through whom you can know the Vedas. So Garuda is a very important deity in Hindu worship. Sesha, for example, is interesting. Sesha, Ananta Sesha, as you would have heard him, he controls that component of your mind that makes you interested in studying Paurusheya Agamas, Puranas, Mahabharata, Pancharatra Agamas, and so on. He gives you that inspiration to go and study this. So having these two guys in our hands and getting their blessing becomes a key part. Garuda Sesha become key part before we make our spiritual journey. And having Rudra there also is important because we need to stabilize and steady our mind so that Garuda and Sesha can take us towards Vedas and Puranas and Mahabharatas so that we can understand philosophy. So coming back, so this particular slide essentially gives you a summary of 24 key Jada Tattvas and their corresponding Abhimani Devatas that control these aspects of the universe. Okay, so that is about Jada Prakriti and then the various Abhimani Devatas of these components. Now the next question is, how many such Devatas are there? So Devatas, mind you, I am saying Devatas because there is only one Brahman, Ekam Eva Advitiyam. Yeah, there is only one Brahman, there is only one Supreme, but there are lots of servants who do various things in the universe. Okay, so the popular view is there are 9 crore Devatas in Vedic pantheon, and some places it is also described as 33 crore Devatas, but the prevailing view is 9 crore Devatas are there looking after various aspects of God's creation. Okay, now these are all Devatas. So where do we fit in? We are not Devatas, we are just ordinary souls. Where do we fit in and where have we come from? Now, our scriptures are very clear about how we come about, how the jivas come about, because we need to talk about our creation. So the question is, where have we come from? We are here and we are going to be going somewhere else after this lifetime. So we do need to have that understanding as to where we have come from. Yeah. So we have also come from the Supreme. The scriptures tell us that we as jivas are in the Supreme's womb. We are in his tummy. In Pralaya, before creation, all the jivas, the ordinary souls like us, we were all in suspended animation in the abdomen of the Supreme, is what the scriptures tell us. And then during creation, along with all these Abhimani Devatas who come in, once the Brahmanda is created and once all the material aspects has evolved, then the jivas start assuming bodies and they are created. Okay? So we have been in suspended animation in the Supreme's belly and we have come out in creation. We'll tackle that point a little bit later in this talk. Now, so remember, I told you about Brahman, I told you about Jada Prakriti, I told you about Chetana Prakriti, I told you about Jivas. Okay. Now, the question is, were these guys created at any point? Yeah. Now, we described before, he is called Brahman or God because he is uncreated. What about the other 3? What about Lakshmi? What about Jada Prakriti? What about souls? Were they created or not? Is a question in philosophy and in Vedic philosophy. So Krishna, for example, gives an easy answer to this in chapter 13. I've taken this verse to illustrate the point. So in chapter 13, verse 20, Krishna says, Prakrutim Purusham Chaiva Vidya Anadi Ubhavapi Vikaramshta Gunamshta Vidhi Prakruti Sambhavan. Okay. First line is important. So I hope you're in this slide with me here in your slide set. So eternal entities in Vedic philosophy, that's the title of that slide. So the first line is very important for us to understand what is the Vedic view on the creations of others. Prakritim ubhavapi. So ubha means two. Okay? So Krishna is saying Prakritim ubhav. Prakritis are two. Chetana Prakriti, which is Lakshmi, and there is Mula Prakriti, which is the Sattva Rajas Tamo, the Jada Prakriti. So he says Prakritim ubhavapi vidya anadi. Anadi means, Adi means that which has a beginning. Anadi means that which does not have any beginning, which means that which was never born. Okay, so Krishna is very clearly saying here, Lakshmi was never born. She has always been a consort of Vishnu. Mula Prakriti was never created. It was always there eternally. Okay, so this is something that we need to ruminate and think about it as to how is it possible there could be some entities that have never been created. Okay? So along with Mula Prakriti, the Shastras also tell us Kala, time is uncreated. Okay? So when I say time is uncreated, I mean absolute time. And we discussed this in the previous week, that absolute time, that is time as an absolute entity, as an everlasting present, has always been there even during Pralaya. The relative time of past, present and future begins at Big Bang. But time as an entity has always been there. And here, this is a concept in Vedic philosophy that is extremely advanced. So if you go to cosmology and astrophysics, scientists are still grappling with the concept of time. They still can't understand what time in physics is. Is it a physical entity or is it an inferential concept? Is it relative? The Vedic philosophers knew about time long time ago. They think this is a dravya, as it's called. It is an entity. Okay? Similarly, there is another entity called Avyakrita Akasha, which is also eternal, which is not material space. This is non-material space. Then there is the interesting concept called Varanatmaka Shabda. Shabda means sound. Varanatmaka means the unmanifested sound. The unmanifested sounds, maybe we can deal with it at some point in the future. Unmanifested sound in specific sequences form the Vedas. So the view there is Vedas are also eternal. They have never been created. So these are some of the eternal entities. That is Prakritim ubhavapi vidya anadi. Purusham ubhavapi vidya anadi. So Purusha means what? One Purusha is Uttama Purusha, Purushottama. We have discussed him already, saying that Vishnu, he is called Ajaha because he is unborn, and that is why he is called Ajaha. Krishna is also saying it is not just me who is unborn, but the Jivas. Jivas are also called Purushas. Yeah. So these are called Kshara Purushas. Chapter 15, verse 16. Chapter 15, verse 16 will give you that view about the Kshara Purushas. So Uttama Purusha, Purushottama is also unborn. The Jivas are also unborn. Then it says the karmas of the Jivas are also eternal. They have always been with the Jivas. And the Jiva Swabhava, the inherent nature or attributes of the Jivas are also eternal. Okay? So this is a complicated concept, but something that we need to think about deeply to understand the Vedic philosophy, that there are certain eternal entities, uncreated eternal entities. So what the Supreme Being does is, he keeps the soup that has always been there and he mixes them. So that is what Vikaramshta means. Vikaramshta means he mixes them and transforms them. And Gunamshta, the Sattva Rajas Gunas, and then that is how the various beings come into being. Okay? So the eternal entities in Vedic philosophy, think about it, do some reading to get at the heart of this concept. So next the question is, if there are these eternal entities, then how is it that the Supreme actually brings forth the creation? And again, credit to our Vedic rishis. They have thought about this problem. How can you have eternal entities, and how can an eternal Supreme make these the cocktail and bring the universe? And I put a figure here, moving on to the next slide, saying that God is the independent cause of his creation. And I have put a potter there. I just picked it up from Google Map, which kind of summarizes what the view is. So you have a potter who's sitting there, there is a wheel, and there is a bag full of mud. So this bag full of mud is the Mula Prakriti. The potter is Brahman. Yeah. and then he is creating various objects in this universe. So you have these plates sort of thing, and then you have the pots. You could consider the pots as jivas with bodies, and you can consider these plates as various jadas. So he is using the eternal Mula Prakriti and eternal jivas and putting them together and bringing forth the material universe as well as the living beings who are in this universe. Okay, so this is the key message when Veda Vyasa in the second sutra said Janmadhyasya Yataha, then how he brings this creation is based on this. Now, you may agree or you may not agree with this concept of eternal creation of eternal entities, but this is quite a subtle and quite a complicated philosophy. Is dealt with Veda Vyasa in one of the sutras. It's called Arambanadikaranam. Okay? So this Arambanadikaranam deals with this concept. And Vyasa basically goes to Rig Veda. There is a very famous mantra in the Rig Veda, 10th mandala. It asks the question, Kim Swid Asid Adhishtanam Arambanam Katamatswid Katamasi. It starts with that question, and he goes on and talks about how this universe came about by this independent supreme being who uses these eternal entities which are eternally dependent on him to bring forth the universe. So the concept there is God is the independent cause of his creation. So this is a complicated slide, and I accept this is a complicated concept. But my view on this one is that I wanted to introduce this idea so that you could go and do your own reading and think about it a bit more. Okay, so now we discussed about how the universe has come about with the Jada and the Jivas. Now, the other concept that you also need to have a background understanding here is the eternal cycles that we call. We discussed, I said, Data, Yata, Purva, Kalpayata, and there are eternal cycles of creation. So how does that pan out? Okay, so this figure, moving on to the next slide, gives you an overarching Vedic view of the cycles of creation. Okay, so now the Vedic time scales is extremely vast. Yeah. If you look at the Judeo-Christian or the modern scientific view of origin of the universe and the end of the universe, it's a linear, it's a line. You start Big Bang, universe, appearance of species, eventually the universe will go to a big crunch and finished. So that's a linear beginning and end. That's it. That's the Judeo-Christian view on this. Whereas the Vedic view is slightly different. We think about time as cyclical, and how do we think about it? So this first concept, there is something called Divya Yugas. You would have all be very familiar with this. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Okay? Now, Kali Yuga has got 432,000 years. We have just passed 5,000 years. Long way to go. So, 432,000 years forms the Kali Yuga. You multiply it by 2, that becomes Dwapara Yuga, that is 864,000. You multiply 432,000 times 3, that becomes Treta Yuga, that is 1.296 million years. Or you multiply 432,000 years by 4, that becomes 1.7 million years. So this forms, these 4 yugas form the Divya Yuga. Okay. Now consider you had those cycles times 71. So 71 Divya Yugas. They form what is called as one Manvantara. Okay. Now, you take 14 Manvantaras and then you add a few extra, several million years. That becomes what is called as one day, daytime for Chaturmukha Brahma. Okay. So if 12 hours is daytime, 12 hours is nighttime. So that also becomes a nighttime. So 12 day, 12 hours nighttime. Okay, so that is called the kalpa. Okay, so one kalpa or one day of Chaturmukha Brahma, within one day, that's 12 hours, 14 manvantaras have happened. Okay, each manvantara has had 71 Divya Yugas, and each Divya Yuga you add, it's like 4.32 million years is one Divya Yuga. Okay, so now the creation and destruction of various types is believed to happen in the Vedic timescales. Manvantara, which is 71 Divya Yugas. When one Manvantara happens, there is a small dissolution that happens. The universe doesn't dissolve. The earth will go through some major transformation. All the living species, all the culture as we know it will all go away. And then a new one will happen in the next Manvantara. Okay? That's called Avantara Pralaya, Manvantara Pralaya. Then you have the Kalpa of Brahma. When Brahma is awake, there are 14 Manvantaras. But when Brahma has gone to sleep, there is another dissolution that happens of the universe, a partial dissolution of the universe. Once Chaturmukha Brahma wakes up from nighttime sleep, another Chaturmukha Brahma creation happens. So this way, this 1 day of Chaturmukha Brahma, 1 year for Chaturmukha Brahma is 360 days, and you multiply that by 100 years. So that is the total lifespan of Chaturmukha Brahma. Now the Mahapralaya, that is the complete dissolution of the universe, is believed to happen when the lifespan of this Chaturmukha Brahma comes to an end. Okay? So that is the reason why I wanted to put this slide, is to tell you the expanse of time that is included in Vedic philosophy. Now some interesting points there. So what is a Manvantara? So Manvantara is Manus. So there are 14 Manus in each Kalpa. Manus are the kids of Chaturmukha Brahma. Each Manvantara has a Manu. Okay? As I said, there are 14 Manvantaras. The current Manvantara is the 7th Manvantara. Okay? And it is the Manu's name is Vaivashvata. Vaivashvata Manu. So you would have done all this. Vaivashvata Manvantare, when you do all the Abhishekam and all that, you would have said that, you would have heard your Acharya or Pujari doing all that. So this is a Vaivashvata Manvantara. Okay, when you do Sankalpa, you have this. So this is Vaivashvata Manvantara. And just to give you another point, this is the 28th Divya Yuga of the first day. So this Vaivasvata Mantru has, this Vaivasvata Manu has been there. 27 Divya Yugas have already happened. This is the 28th Divya Yuga, and you're going through Kali Yuga at this point for this Vaivasvata Manvantara. Okay. So to summarize, so Manvantaras, Manus are created by Brahma. It is these Manus who actually create the species of the world. Now, the other interesting concept is in each Manvantara, there is a Vishnu's avatar that comes down. There is a separate Indra who comes down, and there are Sapta Rishis who come down, and the Sapta Rishis' progenies become the humans. So that is the Vedic view, and Gita captures this very well in chapter 9. This Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakriti Jnanti Mamikam Kalpakshaye Punastani Kalpado Visrujami Aham. So he says, when Chaturmukha Brahma is finished and his Kalpakshaya is gone, it is me who creates this universe again. So if you have to understand what Krishna is saying in chapter 9, verse 7, you need to understand this global concept, this expansive concepts of time. Now, another interesting point is, according to the Vedic view, creation is only 1/8, whereas Pralaya is 7/8. So the universe is in most of the time in uncreated mode, and in 1/8 of the time it comes into the created mode. Yeah. The current Chaturmukha Brahma's age is 50 years and 1 day, and his day began 2.3 billion years ago. Just to have that in context. So this cosmic time is very, very similar, parallel with what the current prevailing view of the origin of the universe and so on and so forth. Yeah. So to understand the various types of pralayas, you need to have some background information on what are the time scales in Vedic philosophy. So moving on to the next slide. So yes, we have discussed about the various time spans, various creations, and that how eternal entities are used by the eternal to create all this universe. Now the fundamental question, the very first slide I put that question about the idea of God by Pringle Pattison. Yeah, where he does, why the heck should this guy bother? He was happily sitting there in Pralaya and sleeping. Why on earth should he bring about this universe into creation? Okay, it's a fundamental philosophical question, and that question was raised by the Rishi of the Mandukya Upanishad. Okay? And he said, there are 4 possible views on creation, and there are 3 possible reasons for creation. And that's how he summarized. I just go through this mantra. It's a beautiful mantra. Vibhutim prasavam tu anye manyante srushti chintakaha swapnamaya sa rupeti srushtir yonir vikalpitaha icha matram prabhosh srishtiriti srushto vinishtitaha kalat prasutim bhutanam manyante kalachintakaha. So he gives 4 reasons or 4 views of creation. So let's do vibhutim prasavam tu anye manyante srishti chintakaha. What that means is, some philosophers view that the universe is the transformation of Brahman. Okay. Now, the next line, it says, Swapnamaya sarupeti srishtir yonir vikalpitaha. So that's very, very clear, that line is. There is another view where this is a dream. This universe or this world is a dream or an illusion, is one view. But the Rishi there says, vikalpitaha. Okay. Kalpitaha means think. Vikalpitaha means wrongly think. Okay. So the Rishi is telling us there is the second view, which is a wrong view of saying this universe is an illusion or a superimposition. This is from the Rishi of the Mundaka Upanishad. Then you go to the 4th line, he says, Kalat prasutim bhutanam manyante kalachintakaha. So some people think it is the time that creates the universe. Yeah? Everything is done at a particular time. You create something at a particular time, it dissolves in a particular time. So that is kalachintakaha, the people who think about time. And in fact, I think in the last class, I told you about Kim Karanam Brahma for Shvetashvatara Upanishad. The very first line is Kalaha. So the Rishi takes time as one aspect or one reason for creation. So the Rishi here in Mandukya Upanishad excludes the 3. Okay, he excludes 3 and he says, Icha matram prabho srishtiriti srushto vinishtitaha. The conclusion is, the other 3 possibilities are wrong. The conclusion is, Icha matram prabho srishti. Means it is his desire, it is his icha. He wanted the universe to be created. Who are you and me to ask that question? It is his icha, so he created. Vinishtitaha. Vinishtitaha means that is a concluding opinion. Vinishtitaha means that is the confirmed conclusion. Is vinishtitaha is that this creation is icha matram. God desired that the universe shall happen, so it happened. So that are the 4 possible views of creation and how the Rishi comes to a conclusion. So then he goes on to say, but what are the reasons for creation? You know, he was sleeping happily. Why should he create? Does he need some enjoyment? Does he need something, some desire in him that has not been satisfied? Is that the reason why he is created? So the Rishi says, Bhogartam shrishti iti anye, kridartam iti cha pare. Okay, Devasyaisha Swabhavo is the conclusion there. So first thing is it Bhogartham? Is it that he has had some unfulfilled desire? Is that the reason why he is created? Or Kridartham? Is this a play? Is it just a recreation that he is created? Or is it his intrinsic nature to create? So again, the conclusion there is, it is his intrinsic nature to create, and it is desire to create. And that is the reason why the universe has come into being, is the conclusion of Mandukya Upanishad. Moving on to the next slide, Mundaka Upanishad, then I think we touched upon this 3 weeks ago, about it gives 3 views of the types of creation. And I went through this last time, and I told you about Yata Urnanabihi Sujate Gruhnate Cha, Yata Prativyum Aushadayaha Shambhavati, Yata Sataha Purushat Keshalomani, Tata Aksharam Sambhavati, Iha Vishwam. So it talks about the spider that makes a web. And it says God's creation of the universe is very similar to this web. God's creation of jivas and their play in this world is like a seed. And his creation is a spontaneous act. Okay. Now let us take this a little bit more and dwell on this over the next few minutes. I think it brings out some interesting facts. The next slide, I have put forth a usual, very popular image of how Vishnu is lying down on Anantasesha. Lakshmi is sitting next to him, and from his navel comes a lotus, and on the lotus is Chaturmukha Brahma who's sitting there. Okay, so this is a popular image that we see everywhere. But let me tell you, this is a purely a metaphorical. This is a metaphorical image. I don't think anybody, any one of us here would believe that this is how the universe is. That there is a snake, and then there is some tube that comes out of Vishnu, and that there is a lotus, and on which Chaturmukha Brahma is sitting. No, the concept there is, think about the yata urnanabihi, yeah, srujate. Yeah. So I have put a figure there with a spider that brings forth the web. So that from Vishnu's nabi, from Vishnu's navel, that tube that comes out and forms this lotus is the web. Okay? This is the material universe created by Chaturmukha Brahma, who comes forth from Vishnu. Okay? So that web is a very, very interesting view of looking at it. So if you look at cosmology of space-time and how matter is there, how planets are there in various aspects of the universe, everything is in grids of space and time grids. It almost feels and looks like a web. And I thought that was an interesting analogy of how the whole Jada Prakriti comes out from this spider in space-time grids, and various chunks of matter are placed in various aspects. Now, the Chaturmukha Brahma is supposed to sit on a 14-petal lotus. Okay. Now, what does that 14-petal lotus actually indicate? The 14 petals of this lotus indicates the 14 worlds. Okay. The Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Maholoka, and Satyaloka. These are higher planetary systems. Then you have the lower systems: Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, Patala. So these are the 14 worlds as thought about in the Vedic scriptures. So Chaturmukha Brahma makes these worlds. So that is the symbolic representation of Vishnu, the spider, the web that comes out. The web has got 14 petals, and Chaturmukha Brahma sitting on this. So in fact, Vishwakarma Sukta of Rig Veda celebrates this. It says, Ajasya Nabhav Avadhyekam Arpitam Yasmin Vishwani Bhuvanani Tastuhi. Ajasya Nabha. Ajasya means the one who is unborn. From his Nabha means from his navel. This whole universe came about. Okay. And then there is another important Rig Veda Sukta called Ambrini Sukta. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. It's also called Sri Sukta. Okay, Sri Sukta of Rig Veda, 10th Mandala again, where Lakshmi is talking about this creation and what is her role in this creation. And then I've just underlined 2 lines which are very important. It says, Yam Kamaye Tam Tamugram Krunomi Tam Brahmanam Tam Rishim Tam Sumedami. So Lakshmi says, you know what, I create everybody. I can create Chaturmukha Brahma, I create all the jivas, I create rishis, I create everybody. Aham Suva Pitaras Masya Murdan. So what does that mean? Chaturmukha Brahma comes from my forehead. But then she says, Mama Yonihi Apswantaha Samudre. But my origin comes from this Vishnu. Mama Yonihi Apsu means water. Apswantaha Samudre. He is lying on that cosmic ocean. I come from him. Lakshmi talks about that. Again, this same metaphorical view is also captured in Gita chapter 14, verse 3 and 4, where Vyasa Krishna says, Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbam Dadami Aham Sambhavaha Sarva Bhutanam Tato Bhavati Bharata. Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya Murtayaha Sambhavantiyaha Tasam Brahma Mahat Yonir Aham Bija Pradaha Pitaha. I am the seed of this universe, is what Vishnu claims in this. And this pictorial view of Vishnu and Brahma, Lotus, Lakshmi actually captures these key concepts from Rig Veda as well as from Gita. And I haven't listed several mantras from the Upanishads here purely from lack of time. Now, for the jivas, it becomes very interesting. The jivas creation, as we discussed before, is that jivas primarily are uncreated, as I told you. Jivas, there was never a point that jivas were created. but they still come into creation in the sense that they acquire a body and go through samsara. Okay. Now, key concepts to be understood about jivas. Jivas or souls, or us as souls, we are subatomic. Okay. Shvetashvatara Upanishad talks about this. It says Vala Agra. So it says you take a hair from the tail of a horse, you divide it into 100,000. However, that small 100,000 part of the tip of a hair of a horse is the size of the jiva. So what that means is, it's not literally 100 of the tip of the tail of the horse. It means that the jiva is very, very small. Okay? So that is one concept. The next one is jivas are infinite. There is no fixed number of jivas in the universe. Okay? There is a very famous Shruti Veda text called Vatsachuti. So that says Anagataha Atichashta Yavantaha Sahitaha Kshanaha Atita Anagatashteva Yavantaha Paramanavaha Tato Api Ananta Gunita Jivanam Rashayaha Prutak. So it says basically, how many ever Paramanus are there? Take all the atoms in the universe. Take all the time, the milliseconds that have happened before and the milliseconds that are going to happen later. You add them all together, still the number of jivas is more than that. So, 2 points there. The Vedic Rishis is talking about atoms, Paramanavaha. So, they are talking about subatomic particles and atoms long before our physicists had a view of atoms. Number first point. And the second point is the universe are infinite along as per this view. And in fact, Skanda Puran goes on to say the universe are infinite, but they are also everywhere in the universe. And it says Paramanu Pradeshepihi Anantaha Prani Rashayaha. And this is also an important. How did this Skanda Puran guy know that in atoms there is space? That is what he is talking about. There is space. Even in that space, there are infinite jivas, is what is the view here. So eternality of souls and the infinite number of souls, and they are everywhere. Okay. Now, these souls, although they are everywhere, only some of them are actually is what you and me we are seeing on this earth. There are probably other areas where there are living beings. The Veda says jivas have what is called as a very subtle body called the linga sharira. That is how they are in suspended animation before creation. When Brahmanda happened, when all these 24 tattvas mixed together and we have this Panchabhuta that happened, the Panchabhuta is what our body is. That is the Stula Sharira, which is the Panchabhutas. Okay? So the Stula Sharira. Then you have the components of the mind and Buddhi that forms the Shukshma Sharira, and the subtle component of the mind called the Chetana, which forms the Linga Sharira. Okay? And inside that is the pristine Jiva. So what this Jiva does is, it contacts with the external world and runs its affairs with 3 coverings: Linga Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and Stula Sharira. Now, the actions that you do, they all form what is called as imprints. They form this genomic imprints on your Linga Sharira. So this is called karmas. We can deal with it at another session as to what really is the concept of karma. So according to the Vedic view, the karmas are the imprints of our actions that are there in the Linga Sharira. So our whole purpose of sadhana in this life is to remove those karma imprints, the karmic imprints, because it is these karmic imprints that make us move from different births, different bodies. So once we have removed our karmic imprints and we have a Linga Sharira which has no karma in it, which means we'll never have another birth, then what will happen is they will all go, this is again, it's a complicated topic, but the jivas at that point will go to Satyaloka with Chaturmukha Brahma. And when the Mahapralaya happens, that is when this Chaturmukha Brahma comes to an end, they have there is a river. And this is interesting. This is a river called Viraja River. Viraja Nadi is the river. On this side is the material world, and this side is the transcendental world. So all these jivas along with Chaturmukha Brahma have a dip in the Viraja Nadi. They shed their Linga Sharira and then they move to the transcendental plane of the Supreme and be in moksha forever. So this is a global view as to what we are doing here. Basically, we've got this body and we have to go back to we have to go, I wouldn't say go back, we have to go to the Supreme. So that is our summum bonum essence of why we are here. But to go there, what we have to do is we have to, of course, understand these koshas. That is the next stage. And maybe today we may not have time to talk about this in detail, but you will all be very familiar with various koshas: Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanmaya, Anandamaya kosha. So these are all the various components of matter, the Ahankara Tattva, the Mahat Tattva, the Panchabhutas that we discussed. So they all correspond to the various components of the Brahmanda. They form the Pindanda. Okay. Now, moving on to the next slide. The next question is, this is still another question I'm sure one of you might ask me, is how does the Jiva get linked with bodies? Yeah, so you have the Jiva, but how does it get linked with the gross body? Okay, and Gita, for example, please see verse 13-21 that gives you the answer. Basically, the verse is Karya Karana Kartrutve Hetuhu Prakriti Ruchyate Purushaha Sukadukkanam Bhoktrutve Hetu Ruchyate, which means it is that Shri Tattva, that Lakshmi, who actually, the Chetana Prakriti, which actually binds the Jivas to various bodies. That is the view. And once the body, the Jivas are bound to this body, they go through their experiences in the world and they go through suffering and pleasure and pain. Okay? So the Sukha and Dukkha is given by the Supreme Being, who authorizes and gives them Sukha and Dukkha, therefore, so that they can experiment this samsara and eventually find peace and salvation and go back to moksha. So that is the grand view and design for creation. So again, one particular slide, and this is a key slide. This is called Shodasha Purushaha. Okay, so this is the core essence of how the jiva is actually linked with the body. So the Upanishad, this comes in Prashna Upanishad. It is the 16th, is the 6th question in Prashna Upanishad is, who is the Shodasha Kala Purushaha? So basically in Vedas, numerology is key, Sankhya. Everything is in numbers. There are lots of philosophy in numbers. 16 is an important number that I would request you to hold in your mind. The 16th number is the Jiva. The 16th number Jiva is covered by 15 fences, as it's called. So the 15 fences covers the 16th entity called the Jiva. Lakshmi, who is the Chetana Prakriti, basically links number 16 to all the 15. And the guy who cuts this link is number 18, who is Vishnu. Okay, so 16, 17, and 18, they become key numbers. The reason why I wanted to say this is, think about number 18. Mahabharata has got 18 Paravas. Gita has got 18 chapters. The Mahabharata war happened for 18 days. There were 18 Akshohinis where the battle happened. Yajurveda Purusha Shukta has got 18 mantras. Ishavasya Upanishad has got 18 mantras. There are 18 major Puranas. Okay? So the number 18 basically denotes the Supreme Being or the Vishnu. And every scripture that ends with 18 is because they are talking about that 18th entity. Now that 18th entity in Bhagavad Gita, it told 574 verses. Okay, 574 verses were the verses spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. You add 5 plus 7 plus 4 is 16. Yeah, 16 is the Jiva. So number 18 has spoken to number 16 about the whole philosophy of creation and our purpose here, so that we understand him and that with his grace, we can cut that link that Lakshmi has done. That is number 17 has done to number 16. So this is one of those philosophies that evolves and blossoms once you get grasp of the various tattvas and the various Shodasha Kala Purushas, and then you can now understand why that number 18 is very important in Mahabharata. Okay, so we're coming to the tail end of the talk. Moving on to the next stage, so we have to cut our links in this universe. But what we are doing now, we are going through various living species because we have been linked. Lakshmi has linked us to this material universe, and based on our karmas, we are going through various species of life. Okay, so this view, Vedic view of evolution of species, is slightly different from the evolution of species of Darwin. I've got a slide on Darwin. I don't think we'll have time to discuss this fully, but the next slide essentially summarizes that. Basically, what Darwinism says is that varieties can become species through breeding, evolution is unguided and a natural process, and that the neo-Darwinism is through random mutations. Okay, so that is the view of Darwinism. There is a lot of counter-Darwin hypothesis that is coming through. Darwinism is not the summum, it is not the final say in evolution. Yeah, there are lots of problems. Yeah, I've summarized it in red. Survival of the fittest, but not the arrival of the fittest. Mendelian inheritance is only shuffling of the cards. You can shuffle your pack of cards. You can have various combinations, but you can never create a new card. So that needs to be remembered. Neo-Darwinism through random mutation is an interesting concept, but when you go into the science behind it, there is statistical impossibility of acquiring a series of thousands of mutations to happen for a biological process to happen. For example, a famous argument taken is the creation of an eye. For a creation of an eye to evolve, there needs to be so many mutations, they all need to happen at the right time. Okay? But this is a statistical impossibility. Darwinism, of course, there are various issues about fake embryos, a lot of fake science there. The tree of life, fossils record is very, very dubious. There is something called the Cambrian evolution. Yeah? Cambrian evolution, the Cambrian period, there was an explosion of living species. Nobody knows why. Okay? There is still no archaeological evidence for transition species. There is no explanation for molecular pathways such as the blood clotting cascade. There are so many proteins involved in this. Evolution of that is just a statistical impossibility. Okay, so Darwinism, evolution of species, has got its limitations. The Vedic view is there is an intelligent design to the various species. There is a William Paley's watchmaker argument, which is interesting, where the William Paley basically says somebody is walking in a forest and he sees a watch. He picks up the watch and he opens it up and he sees how intricate the watch is. Then he concludes, okay, this watch is so complicated, so there has to be a watchmaker. So there has to be an intelligent design behind this watch. Such is the creation of living beings and the bodies, and how the speech, there must have been an intelligent design to this. Madhvacharya, for example, will pick up this concept and say, and I've said this time and again, Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parashaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. So when you see this intelligent design of our own bodies and our own universe, we need to constantly think about the fact that there has to be an intelligent design behind this. And such is the intelligent design of the living beings who are in this body. Okay, and what we are doing, we are going through various species due to our ignorance, and how that happens, how that karma happens, perhaps maybe is a discussion on another occasion. For example, in Chandogya Upanishad, I'll take the last line here. Tata iha vyagro va, simho va, vruko va, varaho va, kito va, patango va, damsho va, mashako va, yadyad bhavanti, tat tada bhavanti. It says, because of the ignorance of the previous mantras deal with this and says, because of this, they become tigers, some become lions, some wolf, boar, worm, fly, gnat, and mosquitoes. They're going through these cycles of births. Okay. So, the other point in the last 5-10 minutes, what I want to introduce is, having spoken so much, I told you about Mandukya Upanishad, where the Mandukya Upanishad looked at 4 reasons for creation, and he took that it cannot be an illusion. But yet, there are some schools of philosophies that propound this view that this world is an illusion. This world is not reality. This is just a superimposition and so on. For that view, there is no Vedic evidence, is what I would put forth in this forum, and I can give, and all the acharyas that I know of have given enough evidence to conclusively prove that this world is not an illusion. Okay, Now, the evidence that we need to go for is we need to go into the Upanishads and Vedas to understand why this world cannot be an illusion. So that takes us to the core problem, because there are several places in the Vedas where the word Maya is used. Okay, Maya means an illusion. So do we take a literal sense of what Maya means, or is there another meaning for it? Say, for example, in Mandukya Upanishad, it says, Anadi Mayaha Shuktaha Yada Jivaha Prabudhyate Ajam Manidram Aswapnam Budhyate Tada Prapancho Yadi Vidyeta Nivarteta Na Samshayaha Maya Matram Idam Dvaitam Advaitam Paramartata. In Rig Veda, Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya Indro Maya Bihi Purarupayate. Shvetashvatara Upanishad gives a confirmatory evidence as to who these guys are. Mayam tu Prakrutim Vidyam Mayinam Chya Maheshwaram. Shvetashvatara Upanishad is saying that. In Gita 7, Devi hi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. So the Maya comes in various areas. Brahmasutra Maya Matrantu Karshneya. Okay. So the word Maya comes in various Upanishads, but the word Maya has several meanings. And we discussed about this Vedanga called Nirukta. Nirukta, or etymology of words. Okay. So when one interprets these words that come into Upanishads, one needs to take Vyasa Niruktam, Yashka Niruktam, that is the etymology of words, to understand the meaning of that. So the true meanings of Maya, there are at least 6 meanings of Maya. One meaning is called Icha, Mahima, Prakriti, Chetana Prakriti, ignorance, and one meaning is illusion. So there are 5 other meanings for Maya. So God's Icha, God's desire. We discussed about God's desire of the universe. So the Maya there could mean any of this, certainly the first 5, but not necessarily the last one, which is illusion. So what we need is an interpretation of the Vedas and Upanishads based on academic study, based on Niruktam, based on what's called the contextual relevance of Prakarana, to see what is before, what is after, and then read what is the meaning of the Upanishads. It would be a crime, in my view, to just pick up certain words from the Upanishads to satisfy one's own hypothesis and come with an explanation. What we need is an honest view of the Upanishads and its understanding before we claim this world is an illusion. And as I said before, if this world was an illusion, Veda Vyasa would have never said, Janmadhyasya yataha. He who is the creator of this universe is God. Because if this world is a false entity, then you're saying he's a great artist, but his art is false. So one needs to think about these concepts. Then there is all these words called Maya. Maya also comes in. You have Maya, then you have Maya. You have Mrunmayam, Lohamayam, and so on. Again, what I want to illustrate here is those words have different meanings. You have to use Nirukta, grammar, and etymology to understand these words. Maya, for example, means prachurya or abundance, vikara or transformation, tadatmya, which means swarupa. So when I say jnananandamaya, I am jnananandamaya. When I say pot as mrinmaya, which means that it's a transformation of mud. When I say the coverings of this body is annamaya pranamaya, which means there's abundance of anna, which is the part of the panchabhutas. So that is how you need to interpret that. Then, of course, in Gita, for example, there are words like Mayi and Maya, Maya. So they all mean to me, by me, and for me, and I. So the reason why I had these 3 slides is basically to try and air some confusions of what is Maya, and what is Mayi, and so on, that comes in scriptures. Because again, I come back to this. We need to go back to the core text. We need to have an open mind. We need to use all the rules of interpretation before coming to a conclusion as to whether the world is real or not. Okay, so this world is real, and God is real, jivas are real, we are really going through samsara, the coronavirus is real, people are dying, which is real. None of this is an illusion. What we are seeing today in the external world is the standing example of the reality of the universe in which we live. This essentially is Adhyatma. What is Adhyatma? Again, in Sanskrit grammar, Atma can have various meanings. Atma means body, Atma means mind, Atma means self, Atma means God. So the whole idea of Vedic studies and philosophy is, Adhyatma is, you know the physical science, which means how the universe, the material universe is operating. Then you know about the psychological science. How does the mind operate? Why do I think like this? Okay. Then you go to the science of self-realization. You know about yourself. And then you finally go to the science of God realization. And how do you realize that? You understand that the Supreme Being is an independent entity. He is the creator of this universe, and all of us are dependent on him. In fact, Madhvacharya in one of the works called Tattva Sankhya basically says, Swatantram Paratantram Dvividam Tattvamishyase Swatantro Bhagavan Vishnu. Okay? He is the one supreme entity. All of us are dependent on him. And this is the core concept of Ishavasya Upanishad, which essentially forms the foundation for Karma Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. And it says, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yakkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita ma grudaha kasyasvid dhanam kuruvanneve iha kuru karmani jijishi vishet shatam samaha. So what it says is, this whole universe is a creation of the Supreme. He is the independent controller. He owns everything. Okay? Our job here is to be here, to use what he has given us as much as we want, and carry on with our sadhana and go back and find our liberation and go to moksha. So this is a summum bonum of Vedic philosophy, and I wanted to introduce this concept of creation and how it happens and so on. That is foundational. Once we grasp that concept, then tackling other things like rebirth, tackling other things like karma, tackling things like, is it karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, what is the system, everything else will fall into place. Okay, so I'll stop there, and I think this time I've been just a little bit over, but I'm glad I finished on time. Thank you very much for listening. Hare Krishna.
Hi, Madhu, thanks again for a wonderful lecture again. I think a lot of issues were quite deep, and I think it's much better we sort of took 2 weeks to do this, and maybe I think we need another week. And a lot of explanations, a lot of things. I mean, the only thing is many people are are probably new to this actually. So I think it will take a bit of time to assimilate. And I think it's been very useful, and it answers this sort of a basis from which a lot of questions can be answered actually. I want to ask other people if they got any questions. If you can ask, please.
Madhu, this is Deval here.
Hi.
Hi. So you've introduced a concept of time in today's talk. Who or why is saying that this is the 7th hour or whatever? Manavantara.
7th Manu, yes. So you mean where the references?
No, as in why, or what is an explanation from the knowledge that we have so far that this is the 7th? Because there is no, I mean, I'm talking as a scientific person, and I don't have a counter to this. So
how do we, so you're saying where is the evidence?
Yeah, so why is it not the 5th, or why is it not the 9th?
Okay, so the 5th Manu is gone. The 5th Manu, the previous creation is gone. So I think the evidence for this, you will have to pick it up from our scriptures. So the evidence is from scriptures, because you and me, we can't go back several billion years ago when the previous Manu was there. So we can't go back. So we have to go to our scriptures to try and find evidence for this. Now, why do we need to go back to scriptures? Because that's an entirely different topic here, because there are only 3 modes. There are only 3 ways in which you can have knowledge. Okay, it's called Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama. So with pratyaksha means you and I seeing this physically through our sense organs, experiencing it, and then understanding that is there. Okay. So the fifth Manvantara, whether we were there or not, I don't know. But currently now we can't go and see this, so we can't have that perceptual knowledge of that. The second was inferential knowledge. Again, that cannot be conclusive. It can be both ways. So for these kind of concepts, one has to go to scriptures. That is the third modes of knowledge to understand and to take what the scriptures have actually told us. So that is the first point. The second point is you could then say, but how do you know that the scriptures are authentic? And how do you know that the scriptures are not lying? Okay. So for that, you will have to talk about and understand. So these concepts come from the Vedas. Okay. So the Hindu view of the Vedas is, Vedas are supreme sources of knowledge. They are defectless. They are apaurushaya, which means they are not man-made, and they have no defects in them. And whatever is said in the Vedas is the ultimate truth. Okay. So that is the view of the Vedas. Now you can have a very scientific discussion or a logical discussion as to why the Hindus actually view the Vedas are the supreme sources of knowledge. That probably is for some other week. If Sudarshan permits, we can tackle that. But the evidence of this comes from our scriptures, is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, thanks. So what you're saying is this is what the scriptures say.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it makes sense of cyclical time, because the cosmological view of the universe is that it is not a linear entity, it is cyclical. And there is creations and dissolutions that is happening all the time. And that the Manvantara concepts actually fits into this view of the cyclical creation that happens.
Okay. Thank you.
For example, when you have, so in Manvantara, you have Avantara Pralaya. At one Manvantara's time, you have Avantara Pralaya, which means that the world comes to some kind of a dissolution. All the cultures are lost. All the knowledge is lost. And then when the next Manu comes, everything comes back. The culture and the science and technology all comes back. So one of the views there about the Vedic civilization is, because it's been there for so long, much of what is written in the Vedas is quite astounding. The science, the technology there, and people came in flying saucers and this and so on. This all feels like mythology. But if you understand the concepts of cyclical time, what you could then grasp is that there were these civilizations that were far advanced on Earth, and then there was a Manvantara Pralaya, everything was lost, and everything is now coming to resurgence. So you can kind of accept those concepts.
Thank you.
Madhu, it's Nandesh, just a question from me.
Yeah, hi Nandesh.
Hi. No, in regards to the timeline of a year, what's the Vedic timeline or concept of a year compared to sort of what we know as a year? So when we said Kali Yuga is 432,000 years,
yeah,
is that same as what we know as a year? So how is?
Yeah. So that is based on human years. For us, a year is how long it takes for the sun to go around, 365 days, right?
Yes.
So this calculation of 432,000 years for Kali Yuga is based on human years.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Madhu. A lot of food for thought in this lecture, Madhu. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Madhu, is it right to say the year which we followed was based on our Panchangam, but not the 365 days with the English New Year? Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm talking about, you're right in that sense as well. But if you look at the Chaturmukha's days, the Vedas will say 360 days forms 1 year for Chaturmukha. And then times 100 is 100 years for Chaturmukha. So for Chaturmukha, Brahma's day for year is 360 days. But yeah, you're right. You do follow Panchanga. And the Tithi, for example, is based on the lunar calendar.
Okay. And
so we follow lunar calendar, solar calendar. So it is
for different reasons. For different reasons, yeah. What about? I think I have an observation to make. I think learning about all these things, even looking at all this Kalpa, Manvantara, and everything, itself will make us very much de-stressed, because many times we think like only within our lifetime, isn't it, whatever we think, and then we get very stressed. So if you're learning about all these things, certainly make us look very, very, we are very tiny, extremely tiny portion in a very, very, very big ocean. That itself is a very good de-stressor actually. So is it right, if everybody will agree with that?
Sudarshan, if I can go first, I completely agree with us. What the key things here is, we just don't live once. Okay, and this life is, of course, some of us may be lucky to live longer. There are lots of people out there who are unlucky, who have had COVID and this and that, and they are all slipping out. But the key concept to remember is, this is not one life. We are not here just once. This is cyclical. We are going to go through rebirths and so on. Okay, so that is one. Number two, there is lots more things that we do not know about the universe. But yet, as human beings, we seem to think that we know everything. So that is another thing about we need to be aware of our own ignorance and our own limitations, which is what learning about Shastras will actually tell us. There is a very famous verse in Mundaka Upanishad, and I think we might have discussed it. It says about avijñātam vijānatam, vijñātam avijānatam. So what it means is, he who knows that he does not know really knows, and he who knows he knows does not know anything.
Oh,
what we are currently is, our position is, this is called Kupa Mandukanyana. We are sitting inside a well. We are a frog sitting inside a well. We think that this river is this pond is the vast ocean, and that sky that we are seeing through the well is huge. There's lots more that we don't know, and that we are not even a dust. We are probably a small atom within the dust. But the key message of the Vedas is that this is not one life, that we go through various species of life. We have got a human form of life. We should be very grateful and very lucky that we have a human form of life, and that we need to make the most use of it, so that next time around we don't come back as a mosquito, that we still aim to come back as a human being, if not as a higher human being.
Super. Yep. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll bring an end to this session, and it's a wonderful session again, and we'll all give a hand to Madhu.
Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We'll meet up next week. Thank you. Bye.
Ajit இருந்தானா மீட்ல